There are roads that lead to safety, and there are paths that descend into ruin. A man may believe he is walking securely when, in truth, his steps edge ever closer to a perilous fall. It is not the thunder of judgment that dooms him, but the quiet persistence of his own choices. If you are doing these 5 things, consider this a warning, one that, if heeded, may yet turn you toward salvation, believing you can stand alone. There's a grave mistake in thinking that strength lies in self-sufficiency. The man who says, "I need no guidance, no wisdom beyond my own," is like a ship that mocks the need for a compass. He may sail confidently for a time, but when the storm comes, he will discover too late that he is lost. No one is beyond the need for direction, and to reject it is to invite disaster. Justifying what you know is wrong. The surest way to lose sight of goodness is not to hate it, but to excuse its absence. When a man finds himself explaining away his dishonesty, excusing his greed, or cloaking his pride in noble terms, he does not notice that he is becoming enslaved by the very things he once condemned. The soul that justifies sin is not merely mistaken, it is in danger of becoming unreachable, preferring comfort over truth. Truth, when it first meets a man, often comes as an unwelcome guest. It demands change, and change is uncomfortable. But beware the temptation to choose ease over truth. Many have silenced conviction for the sake of comfort, only to find that their ease was short-lived and their loss was eternal. The man who chooses not to see does not remove the light, he only ensures his own blindness, resisting correction. A wise man listens to reproof even when it stings. A fool resents it and calls it an attack. If you cannot bear to be corrected, if every warning is met with indignation and every counsel with scorn, then know this: you are walking a path where wisdom will eventually stop speaking. When a man has resisted truth long enough, truth will, at last, let him go, loving the world more than the eternal. There are treasures that last and treasures that fade. The heart is drawn to what it values most, and if all your desires are bound to this world, its praises, its wealth, its fleeting pleasures, then you may gain all of it and still lose what truly matters. The tragedy is not in having much, it is in having much and thinking it is enough. A final warning. The most dangerous state is not one of rebellion, but of indifference. To ignore these warnings is not merely to choose wrongly, it is to choose ruin by default. The road to destruction is not always marked with great acts of evil. Sometimes it is paved with small compromises, quiet justifications, and a refusal to listen. If you have seen yourself in these words, then let this be the moment of awakening. There is still time to turn, still time to choose wisely. But remember this: every road leads somewhere, and where you end up will be determined by the steps you take today. A man who believes himself to be self-sufficient has already embraced one of the oldest and most dangerous deceptions. It is a belief that whispers to him in the quiet moments of success, convincing him that his strength, his intellect, and his will are enough to guide him through life. It tells him that dependence is a weakness, that asking for help is an admission of failure, and that wisdom is something he can produce from within rather than receive from without. Such a man builds his life as if it were a fortress, high and impenetrable. Yet he does not realize that the walls he has built for security are the very things that will one day trap him. There is a reason why civilizations from their earliest days have sought counsel, guidance, and shared wisdom. The notion that one can navigate the complexities of life without a guide is not merely reckless, it is contrary to the way the world has always worked. A child does not teach himself to speak. A soldier does not train himself for battle, and even the greatest minds stand on the shoulders of those who came before them. Yet, the self-sufficient man sees himself as an exception. He believes that through sheer determination, he can carve his own path without the aid of instruction or correction. He mistakes his own perspective for ultimate truth, and he walks in the confidence of his own understanding. This illusion is most dangerous because it does not reveal its consequences immediately. The man who trusts only in himself often appears successful for a time. He may even rise above others in status, wealth, or influence. He takes pride in his independence, convinced that he has proven his philosophy correct. But success, when built upon self-reliance alone, is a fragile thing. It can endure in times of strength, but it crumbles when trials come. The moment adversity strikes, when sickness arrives, when financial ruin looms, when betrayal wounds him, or when his own strength finally fails, he realizes the depth of his own helplessness. But by then he has no foundation beyond himself, and he does not know where to turn. Pride plays a crucial role in sustaining the illusion. A man who has long believed in his own sufficiency will resist any suggestion that he might be mistaken. He will dismiss advice as interference, counsel as an insult, and warnings as attacks. He will say that he does not need direction, that he is perfectly capable of handling whatever comes his way. If his choices lead him to trouble, he will blame circumstances, bad luck, or the foolishness of others. What he will not do is consider that he may have been wrong all along. Pride is an anchor that keeps a man from seeking help, even when he is drowning. But self-sufficiency is not only a deception of the mind, it is a deception of the soul. A man who trusts solely in himself will not only reject the wisdom of others, but also the wisdom that is beyond this world. He convinces himself that faith, morality, and eternal truths are crutches for the weak, distractions for those who cannot think for themselves. He prides himself on his ability to reason without acknowledging that reason itself is a gift he did not create. He views dependence on anything greater than himself as an outdated relic of simpler minds. But just as a man cannot survive without air, though he does not see it, neither can he flourish without the truths that exist beyond him, though he may deny them. The irony of self-sufficiency is that it is an illusion even in the practical sense. No one, not even the strongest, can truly stand alone. Every man, no matter how powerful, relies on others in ways he does not always recognize. The food he eats is harvested by the hands of others. The knowledge he possesses was written, taught, and passed down by those before him. The roads he travels, the shelter he enjoys, the very language he speaks, all are the result of a world built not by one man, but by many. And yet, The self-sufficient man imagines himself above this reality, blind to the fact that his own life is interwoven with the efforts, wisdom, and grace of others. There is no quicker way to destroy a man's soul than to teach him how to justify his own wrongdoing. The man who sins and knows he has done wrong still retains a glimmer of hope. His conscience stirs within him, whispering that he has strayed, urging him toward correction. But the man who sins and convinces himself that his actions are justified has taken a more dangerous path. He has not only done wrong, but has silenced the very voice that could call him back. Justification begins as a quiet voice, soft and persuasive. It does not demand that a man call evil good, not at first. Instead, it tells him that his case is different. He knows that lying is wrong, but in this instance, it was necessary. He understands that greed is dangerous, but in his situation, he deserves more than others. He has always believed that anger is destructive, but given the way he was treated, his outburst was understandable. In each case, the standard remains the same for others, but he, in his unique circumstances, is an exception. This process is not immediate, it is gradual. A man does not wake up one morning and declare that morality no longer applies to him. Instead, he takes small steps, each one seeming harmless, each one supported by reasonable excuses. At first, he feels a slight discomfort when he compromises his values, but over time, the discomfort fades. His conscience, once sharp and unyielding, becomes dull and pliable. The more he justifies, the easier it becomes to justify again. Before long, what once would have troubled him now seems completely natural. There is a certain arrogance in justification. A man who rationalizes his sins believes, whether he admits it or not, that he sees more clearly than others. He imagines himself wise enough to determine when a wrong is not truly wrong, when a transgression is, in fact, acceptable. He may still claim to believe in virtue, but his virtue is now selective, shaped by his own convenience. He sees himself as an exception to the rules that govern lesser men. And in doing so, he elevates himself not only above morality, but above the very truth that morality is built upon. Justification often wears the mask of wisdom. A man who has spent years excusing his actions may speak with great intelligence, defending his choices with clever arguments. He may even deceive himself into believing that his reasoning is sound. But a lie, no matter how well spoken, remains a lie. He can call selfishness, prudence, dishonesty, necessity, and cruelty justice, but the truth does not change because he has given it a new name. Words may disguise a thing, but they do not alter its essence. There is also a social aspect to justification. A man rarely deceives only himself. He seeks to gather others who will affirm his excuses. He surrounds himself with those who share his views, who will nod in agreement when he explains why his actions were unavoidable, why his choices were forced upon him. And in this company, he finds comfort. If others believe as he does, he feels validated. But validation is not the same as righteousness, and the approval of others does not erase guilt. The greatest danger of justification is that it removes the need for change. A man who acknowledges his sin has the opportunity to turn away from it. He may struggle, he may fail, but as long as he knows he is in the wrong, the door to redemption remains open. But a man who justifies his sin sees no need to change. He remains as he is, convinced that he is already right. He locks himself in his condition, unaware that with each passing day, and so justification becomes a prison of a man's own making. He constructs it brick by brick, argument by argument, excuse by excuse. Each justification strengthens the walls, making it harder for truth to break through, until one day he no longer hears the voice of his conscience at all, not because it has ceased to speak, but because he has trained himself to ignore it. There is a silent war within every man, a struggle between what is easy and what is right. The natural inclination of the human heart is toward comfort, toward the path of least resistance. It seeks what soothes, what pleases, what offers rest without effort. Truth, on the other hand, is often demanding. It requires a man to change, to confront himself, to acknowledge what he would rather ignore. And so, when faced with the choice between comfort and truth, many will choose the former, believing they have made a wise decision. In doing so, they do not realize that they have sacrificed what is eternal for what is fleeting. Comfort, in its simplest form, is not evil. A man must eat, must sleep, must find moments of peace amid the burdens of life. But when comfort becomes the guiding principle, when it dictates his decisions and shapes his beliefs, it becomes a slow and subtle poison. He begins to make choices not based on what is true, but on what is convenient. He avoids hard questions, turns away from difficult responsibilities, and silences any thought that might disturb his sense of ease. He tells himself that he is simply choosing peace, but in reality he is choosing blindness. Truth often arrives as an unwelcome guest. It knocks at the door, not with soft words, but with the force of a challenge. It demands examination, self-reflection, and sometimes painful change. It does not flatter, it does not make excuses. It stands firm, unmoving, waiting to be acknowledged. But the man who prefers comfort will refuse to open the door. He will pretend not to hear. He will find distractions, pleasure, entertainment, work, anything to keep his mind occupied. The longer he ignores truth, the more he convinces himself that it was never knocking at all. There is a certain kind of fear that keeps a man in comfort. He is afraid of what he might find if he looks too closely at himself. He is afraid that the truth will require him to let go of things he enjoys, to change habits he has grown accustomed to admit faults he has spent years denying. And so he chooses to remain as he is. He tells himself that there is no urgency, that tomorrow is always available for deeper reflection, that another day will come when he is ready to face reality. But the longer he waits, the harder it becomes to move. A man who values comfort above truth is easily deceived. He listens only to words that reassure him, that affirm his existing beliefs, that demand nothing of him. He seeks teachers who tell him what he wants to hear, who promise that all is well, who paint the world in pleasant colors. He rejects any voice that challenges him, any wisdom that unsettles him. And in doing so, he creates for himself an illusion, a world built on half-truths, where he can remain undisturbed. But an illusion, no matter how beautiful, will always collapse when reality presses against it. The greatest danger in choosing comfort over truth is that it leads a man not only to avoid what is difficult, but to redefine what is true. He does not merely ignore reality, he reshapes it to suit his desires. What was once clearly wrong becomes acceptable, not because it has changed, but because his willingness to confront it has disappeared. He convinces himself that morality is flexible, that principles are negotiable, that truth is whatever brings him peace. And in doing so, he drifts further and further from what is real. There will always come a moment when comfort is no longer an option. The illusion cannot last forever. Trials will come, suffering will arrive, and the man who built his life on ease will find himself unprepared. He will search for the truth he once ignored, but by then he may have lost the ability to recognize it. He will ask for wisdom, but his ears, accustomed only to pleasant words, will struggle to hear it. And in that moment, he will realize that comfort was never a refuge, it was a trap, a slow descent into blindness, a road that led him away from what he needed most. A man who cannot bear correction is a man who has chosen his own ruin. No one is born with perfect wisdom, nor does anyone naturally walk the right path without stumbling. The road of life is filled with unseen dangers, and only a fool believes he can navigate it without guidance. Correction is not a punishment, but a gift, a light that reveals where one has erred and an opportunity to change course before it is too late. Yet many, out of pride or stubbornness, refuse this gift. They see every rebuke as an attack, every warning as an insult, and every attempt to guide them as an unjust interference. The resistance to correction begins in the heart. It is not merely a rejection of advice, but a rejection of humility. A man who resists correction believes, whether he admits it or not, that he knows enough, that his judgment is sufficient, that he has nothing to learn. He views those who correct him not as friends, but as enemies, not as those who wish to help him, but as those who seek to undermine him. He convinces himself that their words are motivated by jealousy, by misunderstanding, by a desire to control him. In doing so, he shields himself from the very thing that could save him. Pride is the foundation of this resistance. A humble man can accept that he does not know everything, that he can be wrong, that he has blind spots he cannot see. But a proud man cannot endure such thoughts. To admit error, even in a small matter, feels to him like a loss, a weakness, an injury to his sense of self. And so, instead of listening, he defends. Instead of considering, he dismisses. Instead of changing, he hardens. With every rejection of correction, he builds a wall around himself, a fortress of self-assurance that no wisdom can penetrate. A man who refuses correction is often skilled in justifying himself. He can find 100 reasons why his critic is mistaken, why the fault is not his own, why the correction does not apply to him. He will point out the flaws in the one who reproves him, as if the presence of imperfection in another makes truth invalid. He will twist the situation to appear as if he is the victim, as if he is being unfairly judged. In this way, he silences any voice that challenges him, surrounding himself only with those who will affirm his ways. There is a great danger in rejecting correction, for a man who will not be corrected will not improve. He may think himself wise, but he remains blind to his faults. He may believe himself strong, but he stumbles into avoidable troubles. He may call himself independent, but in truth he is enslaved to his own flawed understanding. His growth is stunted, his wisdom stagnant. Over time, he will find that the very people who once tried to help him have stopped speaking, not because they do not care, but because they know he will not listen. Resistance to correction is not merely a personal flaw. It has far-reaching consequences. A leader who cannot accept correction becomes a tyrant. A father who resists correction raises children who learn his stubbornness. A friend who rejects correction becomes isolated. A soul that refuses correction drifts further from truth, further from wisdom. He does not notice the drift, for his pride keeps him blind. But little by little, he moves toward destruction, convinced all the while that he is walking the right path. There comes a time when correction is no longer given. If a man rejects it long enough, those who once warned him will grow silent. He will have trained them to keep their wisdom to themselves, for they know it will only be met with scorn. And then, when trouble comes, he will stand alone without guidance, without counsel, without rescue. He will look around and wonder why no one warned him, not realizing that they did many times, but he refused to hear.